Summer 1944. Almost 5 years after Adolf Hitler triggered World War II, Allied forces pushed the German army out of Normandy, while the Soviet advance in the east seemed unstoppable. Despite this, the Führer appeared relaxed.
Hitler is presenting an aura that suggests everything is just a little setback on what is a destined providential path.
The Führer's belief in victory was at odds with his top generals.
Many of his senior commanders are beginning to ask themselves more and more, what are we going to do about Hitler? If you go on fighting against Germany, you're going to be destroyed.
Hitler. Who was the man behind the monster?
There were just so many parts of this story that didn't add up.
Teenage loner turned national hero.
He was the Messiah for the German people.
How was he able to achieve it?
All of it was an act. All of it was a show.
This is the definitive guide to the most hated man in history. In July 1944, Adolf Hitler was under siege. The Allies were closing in, and his own forces were plotting his demise. As the end game approached, he launched a reign of terror and retreated into a fantasy world. But for the moment, he still believed in certain victory. 7th of July. Adolf Hitler arrived at Klesheim Castle in Austria. To help reassure Germans that they would win the war, the Führer's propaganda team staged events for him to inspect what he called Wunderwaffen, wonder weapons.
A constant refrain of Hitler's in the late period of the war is that, hold on, the wonder weapons are coming. Certainly, by bringing forth the possibility of wonder weapons, he is giving his officers, his men, and his people a reason to stay in the field until the bitter end.
Nazi scientists had been developing the next generation of weapons, including a jet fighter, the Me-262, giant U-boats, and a nearly 200-ton tank. But the most fearsome was the Vengeance Weapon 2, or V2 rocket. These photographs by Walter Frenz reveal a test of the world's first ballistic missile. Development of the V2 was so secret, Hitler banned Frenz from making the photographs public.
You probably could say he is falling into some kind of self-delusion. None of these secret weapons individually were going to turn the tide of the war.
Unlike the German people, some members of the army didn't fall for Hitler's vision.
That opposition is not from the highest reaches of the officer corps. It is not Hitler's generals. It is what we would today call field-grade officers. Hitler's war has led them all into disaster, and Hitler's recent decisions have been particularly catastrophic.
20th of July, 1944. The Wolf's Lair, Hitler's headquarters on the Eastern Front. The Führer was on his way to meet his senior military advisors. At 12:30 p.m., the meeting began with a discussion on how best to use the army units currently based in Germany.
Hitler is just leaning over this massive oak table upon which there's a map of the military situation. The whole table just vaporizes beneath him.
At 12:42 p.m., an explosion killed 4 men and destroyed the conference room. But the target of the bombing plot escaped alive.
The blast blew a lot of Hitler's clothes off, such was the magnitude of it. It seems to be a miracle, at least certainly in Hitler's eyes, that he's survived.
Just over 2 hours later, a defiant Hitler put on a show of invincibility.
He doesn't even cancel his events for the rest of the day. Mussolini is on the way to a visit. Hitler greets him and takes him on a tour of the building in which he had almost just been killed.
Since becoming Nazi party leader, there had been over 40 attempts on Hitler's life, though none had come as close as this. "12 hours after the blast, the Führer made a radio address to the nation to prove he was alive. The impromptu speech was the first time in over a year that he had spoken directly to the German people.
Ich weiß nicht, zum wievielten Male ein Attentat auf mich geplant und zur Ausführung gekommen ist. Ich selbst bin völlig unverletzt. Nur ganz kleine Hautausschürfungen, Prellungen oder Verbrennungen.
His voice is unmistakable. And indeed, some of the plotters listen to the radio broadcast and they say to themselves, it's all up, we failed.
Ich fasse das als eine Bestätigung des Auftrags der Vorsehung auf, mein Lebensziel weiter zu verfolgen, so wie ich es wieder getan habe.
The plot to kill Hitler was led by Army Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg.
Removing Adolf Hitler as this borderline insane guy who is going to run Germany into the ditch and replace him with more rational statesmen and military leaders who will wind down the war and try to preserve German power intact.
Stauffenberg had placed a briefcase bomb within yards of Hitler's feet. Hitler's death was to be the signal for an army coup.
Der Kreis, den die Usurpatoren darstellen, ist ein Denkverkleider. Hat mit der deutschen Wehrmacht und vor allem auch mit dem deutschen Heer gar nichts zu tun. Es sind ein ganz kleiner Klüngel verbrecherische Elemente, die jetzt unbarmherzig ausgerottet werden.
By the time Hitler was on air, Stauffenberg and 3 of his co-conspirators had already been executed. Others would soon meet their fate. In the meantime, Hitler made another public appearance, this time visiting those wounded in the blast.
There's cotton wool stuffed in his ears to protect his eardrums after they've been burst by the blast. His right arm and hand are in obvious massive amounts of discomfort.
He has serious balance problems and in fact urges that he not be put in front of an audience at any time in the near future because he might just keel right over.
As Hitler left the hospital, an adoring crowd awaited. Part of an upsurge in pro-Hitler sentiment.
A great many ordinary Germans really did feel a great sense of relief that Hitler had survived. There were a lot of demonstrations across Germany of support for Hitler, enthusiasm for Hitler, letters saying, thank God you've been saved.
But the adulation did nothing to heal the emotional scars.
He is very, very scared by what's happened, and he becomes increasingly paranoid that something like this will happen again. He therefore orders that nobody near him can wear a pistol. In many ways, Hitler becomes like one of those mad Roman emperors who's obsessed with people trying to poison him.
Hitler forced 15 women, taken from local villages, to taste his food before every meal.
After they'd eaten it and survived, they'd burst into tears with relief because they were so kind of wound up that this could be their last mouthful.
Hitler's paranoia knew no bounds.
There have been traitors at every turn. Traitors in his entourage, traitors in the party, traitors in the upper reaches of the officer corps, traitors all over the place.
Many of Hitler's most experienced generals were replaced with yes-men. To demonstrate their loyalty, the Wehrmacht made the Heil Hitler salute compulsory for all servicemen. The military was no longer capable of staging a coup to oust him. And now Hitler wanted vengeance. He was ready to launch a reign of terror. It was 2 weeks since Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg's attempt to kill Adolf Hitler. The Führer was intent on revenge. Any of Stauffenberg's co-conspirators who hadn't yet committed suicide were subjected to show trials in the so-called People's Court. Hitler wanted what became known in Germany as blood vengeance.
Hitler has a vengeful personality. We've seen that in the past. Here, he can really let his vengeance, his sense of vengeance, go, because here are real plotters, real threats to the German people, real threats to the German future.
He orders them all to be hung up with piano wire, which is the most gruesome death. What makes it even more gruesome is that Hitler has it filmed.
According to Albert Speer, Hitler watched films of the executions night after night. Meanwhile, Heinrich Himmler's Gestapo executed anyone perceived as a threat.
A new kind of criminal justice is now put into play, the Sippenhaft, the arrest of those who are disloyal to the regime and the punishment of their families.
It leads to massive reprisals all across Germany as Hitler now pursues his sick revenge fantasies against anyone even remotely suspected of connection to this plot. 7,000 Germans are arrested, 4,980 killed.
Along with this repressive state came a heightening of repression within the armed forces. Tens of thousands of German soldiers are put on trial and shot in this last year of the war, usually on specious charges of desertion or cowardice. For an army whose manpower reserves had become so limited, this was the last thing it needed.
24th of August 1944. As Hitler ordered the execution of his own troops, Allied forces liberated Paris. Within 3 weeks, US troops became the first invading force to set foot on German soil since the war began.
Most Germans are despairing. They know the war is almost assuredly lost. And yet, the Hitler myth proceeds. There are enough people who believe that Hitler still might have one last trick in his bag.
On the 6th of September 1944, the first V-2 rocket was fired at Paris. But like the rest of Hitler's wonder weapons, it failed to stop the advancing Allied forces. 6 weeks later, the Red Army crossed the German border into East Prussia.
In Nemmersdorf und den anderen ostpreußischen Orten
Nazi propaganda seized on evidence of atrocities.
We have now Goebbels and Hitler pressing the notion that if you don't fight harder, if you don't ward off those Asiatic hordes from the east, they're going to exact horrifying revenge.
Geschändete Frauen, erschlagene Greise, ermordete Kinder.
The Red Army wanted revenge for the Soviet civilians murdered during Hitler's invasion. Yet the Führer rejected any suggestion of a peace deal.
There are rumors of the awful things. In fact, they're the same things that German soldiers and security men have been doing in the East, of course, for years. But for the German people, they're horrifying. This could happen to us. And I think for a great many German men, for example, that they see that their one task now is to somehow defend their families and so on from the Red Terror.
Hitler was driven by memories of the so-called stab in the back. His belief that socialist politicians betrayed Germany by surrendering at the end of World War I.
One of the significances of the belief of the stab in the back is a determination that it will never happen again. And so that when we move forward to the Second World War, defeat, destruction with honor is preferable to surrender. He will never allow any of his soldiers to surrender, and he certainly won't surrender himself.
When the Führer's inner circle urged him to rally public support, Hitler ignored his people's plight.
For ordinary German people, it's a problem. Who are we fighting for? I think for a lot of soldiers, a lot of ordinary workers and so on, they're increasingly fighting for Germany now, not fighting for Hitler.
Hitler's public presence faded as his sole focus became turning the tide of the war, which he believed only he could achieve.
If he doesn't do something now, sooner or later he's going to be squeezed between the vice of the Western Allies on the one hand and Russia on the other. In his view, the better chance of succeeding is taking on the Western Allies. He doesn't have a hugely high regard for American troops.
Using his panzer divisions, Hitler wanted to attack between American and British forces in the Ardennes forest and take the port of Antwerp, their crucial supply line.
This is Hitler's last big roll of the dice. If he can split these armies, then this will vastly slow down the Allied deployment to Western Europe, allow him to fend them off, and then turn everything he has against the Soviet army moving in from the east.
Hitler's generals knew they didn't have enough fuel or military hardware and were woefully under-equipped for such an assault. They told him even if they did reach Antwerp, there was no way of holding the port.
He disregards it all and says, believe me, it's going to work. We're going to unhinge the enemy in the West as we unhinged them in 1940.
Hitler launched his Operation Autumn Mist, a conflict more famously known as the Battle of the Bulge. Initially, the Allies were caught unprepared. But Germany lost 300 planes and 100,000 men in just 40 days fighting. Hitler's gamble was a disaster. As his generals feared, Germany's forces were unable to cope with Allied air superiority and troop numbers. Hitler demanded a showdown with his military commanders.
Hitler reacts to the failure of the Ardennes offensive really rather characteristically, of course, that he blames everybody except himself.
It's the fault of the German generals and the German troops who simply didn't live up to his high expectations.
I've decorated them and I've spoilt them with everything and they've just betrayed me.
Hitler's failed attack left both ground and air forces critically weakened. Germany could no longer fend off the Allies from the West or the Soviets from the East.
It was a bleak moment of truth. Hitler realizes that there aren't any more gambles. He's got nothing else to play.
Hitler responded in typical fashion. He threatened to kill himself. Just like in 1923, in the wake of the failed Munich putsch, and in 1931, on learning of his beloved niece Gailey's death. But as Colonel Below later recalled, Hitler changed to another course of action. "We'll not capitulate. Never. We can go down, but we'll take the world with us." His propaganda mastermind, Joseph Goebbels, the man more responsible than any other for Hitler's rise, begged his Führer to speak to the people.
Despite Goebbels' exhortations, "Come on, mein Führer, go out there, rally people," Hitler knows there's nothing there. There's nothing to defend.
Conceding that his dream of a 1,000-year Reich was over, Hitler found someone new to blame: the German people.
He feels that they have let him down and have let themselves down.
In his own racial fantasies, only the strong survive. And if the Germans are now going down to defeat, it is because they are not worthy to survive.
The once feared German war machine was now retreating further back into the fatherland. As the net closed in, Hitler was now committed to sacrificing his people in an act of spite against the German nation. On the 31st of January 1945, Stalin's Red Army reached the Oder River. They were just 43 miles from Berlin. In the past 7 months, hundreds of thousands had died defending Hitler's Germany from invasion.
They are now having to call up young boys and old men. It's really the last throw of the dice.
In a rare moment of honest reflection, Hitler dictated his thoughts to his private secretary, Martin Bormann.
The situation is serious, very serious. It seems even to be desperate.
What he makes clear is that the current Germans have let him down, but there will come a new Germany. New generations will come.
Whatever reverses we may suffer in the days that lie ahead of us, the German people will draw fresh strength from them, and whatever may happen today, it will live to know a glorious tomorrow.
Hitler retreated to a bunker complex beneath the Reich Chancellery.
Hitler can go anywhere he wants. He can order up a plane, he can fly to Ober-Salzburg, he can go to the American zone in the hope that he'll be taken by them. So, remarkably, Hitler stays in Berlin, stays right in the path of the Red Army that's coming to get him.
Hitler has clearly decided that he wants to somehow create the final drama the way he wants it. And the final drama is that it will be there in the German capital, in his chancellery, defending the Reich to the last against the encircling enemies.
The great dictator, who once ruled from an opulent headquarters in the Alps, now spent most of his day in a 9 by 12-foot room.
From early February, he spends all his time inside the bunker. And I think in a way his ability to do that reflects the way in which his surroundings are actually not important to him. That's not what matters. He's not a man who seeks great comfort or luxury or even anything particularly pleasant in his surroundings. It's damp, it smells of diesel, there are noisy generators. It's an unpleasant place to be.
Hitler's only glimpse of daylight was during his daily walks in the Reich Chancellery garden with his faithful dog, Blondie. His health was failing rapidly.
He looks like an old man. He's acting like an old man. He's doddery. He's incoherent. He rages more and more.
People close to him find it difficult to know exactly what he's thinking. Is he totally despairing, or does he still have hope?
As German forces collapsed in both the East and the West, Hitler withdrew into a world of fantasy.
Is he planning new strategies to get Germany out of the problem it's in? Is he opening negotiations with the Allies? He's doing none of these things. He's peering at models of an architectural rebuilding of Linz.
Hitler's personal cameraman, Walter Frenz, captured him unveiling an intricate model of his beloved hometown in Austria. It was a moment Hitler had waited for since commissioning the project 5 years ago.
There he is, like a little boy, his kind of long-term childhood passion reignited, and he's staring at every detail.
His thoughts turned to his jubilant homecoming during the Anschluss in 1938. Since then, his armies had looted monuments from across Europe to adorn Linz.
His old hometown is going to be the recipient of this great treasure, so that Linz will finally outshine Vienna and really be the city of the cultural future.
Hitler still talked of retiring to Linz after the war. It was a dream that was clearly a delusion, and which was shattered just days later. Hitler heard news of the Yalta Conference, where Allied leaders Winston Churchill, Franklin Roosevelt, and Joseph Stalin were meeting to discuss post-war Europe. The three leaders agreed there would be no negotiated end, only unconditional surrender, and war criminals would be put on trial. Armaments Minister Albert Speer recalled Hitler's defiant response.
I've always said there can be no question of capitulation. History does not repeat itself.
It doesn't really matter if everyone's dead at the end of it, but so long as they've never surrendered. That's all that's important to Hitler.
On the 24th of February 1945, Hitler's most loyal Nazi bosses, the Gauleiters, were summoned to Berlin.
The Gauleiters, who haven't seen him for about 6 months, are pretty shocked at his appearance. He's in a hell of a state. He looks haggard. He's kind of dragging his feet along the floors. He's got bags under his eyes. Even saliva is dribbling from his mouth.
They come from the four corners of Germany, expecting to hear some explanation, some plan for how Hitler is going to get them out of this mess. And what they hear is profoundly disillusioning. Hitler repeats and rambles and rehashes.
Wenn wir selbst, dieses deutsche Volk,
Hitler fondly recalled his first speech as Chancellor, when he commanded the attention of the nation. For hours, he relived past triumphs, with barely a mention of his country's present nightmares.
For the first time since the early days of the party, these staunch Nazis are no longer convinced by what he has to say. Both mentally and physically, he can no longer inspire them, and he probably can't save Germany.
It's a bit like turning up at a wake. It's a wake for the funeral of the Third Reich. The war is lost, and not just lost, but catastrophically lost. And everything they've struggled for has failed.
In a rare excursion from his bunker, Hitler visited army headquarters on the Eastern Front, now just 40 miles from Berlin. Months of military setbacks had taken their toll.
All films of Hitler would be very carefully monitored for whether they showed any signs of his physical deterioration. In his penultimate appearance on camera, it's very clear to see that his left arm is shaking.
For at least 2 years, Hitler had shown an uncontrollable trembling in his left arm, a jerking left knee, and a shuffling gait. Now, at just 55 years old, the symptoms were so severe they undermined his authority.
People don't respect him. Why don't you hold this shot right here? We see in the old days, Hitler would be standing, he would command the room, people would be looking at him, and in this particular situation, he's sitting down. And the height difference means that these people here are now looking down to Hitler versus Hitler looking down to them, which a leader does. He's a broken man and he knows the end is near.
On the 7th of March 1945, the woman who had stood by Hitler for the last 13 years, Eva Braun, arrived in Berlin.
People are shocked because they know that Hitler has ordered her not to come. Hitler wants her to safe, away from Berlin, but she's decided that she wants to be with Hitler. She knows that Hitler is never going to leave that bunker alive, and she wants to be there with him.
Hitler received a memo from his armaments minister, Albert Speer, saying the German economy faced imminent collapse, which would leave them unable to fight the war. 4 days later, Hitler summoned Speer to the bunker. He was determined to destroy Germany rather than surrender. Hitler demanded Speer destroy Germany's infrastructure by implementing a scorched earth policy, later known as the Nero Decree, after the Roman emperor who was believed to have burned Rome to the ground.
Finally hearing that the war is lost liberates Hitler to be the radical he always perceived himself to be.
In Mein Kampf, Hitler states that Germany will be a world power or it will be nothing. And when he realizes that the war is lost, he's as good as his word.
Power plants, factories, roads, dams, they are all to be destroyed. They are to leave the German people with nothing. Even for a true believer like Speer, and he is a true believer, the Nero order goes too far.
Speer worked to persuade the army and local party chiefs to ignore Hitler's demands. He was the first Nazi minister to openly disobey the Führer, a clear sign Hitler's absolute control was waning.
In the bunker, he's absolutely out of touch. He can't see what's happening across his country. I don't think he even knows that he's being disobeyed.
The last surviving footage of Hitler. A man whose rise to power was made by the media and who for the past 12 years had insisted every major event be filmed. He was meeting a group of Hitler youth who were fighting to protect Berlin.
Hitler makes a big thing that the Hitler youth are really loyal to him and he praises them for defending Berlin. There are teams of people going around and arresting anybody who tries to escape and stringing them up on lampposts.
To preserve Hitler's credibility, the censor cut this camera angle from the film. Hitler's hand shook violently as he concealed it from view.
One minute he snatches at a piece of news and thinks that might be a positive thing. At another moment, of course, he is plunged into despair. By this stage, Hitler hopes that Providence has got something up its sleeve.
Hitler's hope of divine intervention was dashed. Stalin directed the brutal power of the Red Army towards Germany's capital.
He's asking for updates. How long till they get here? How many hours from the center of Berlin are they?
4 days later, on Hitler's 56th birthday, the Soviets were just 10 miles from Berlin. For the first time as Führer, he shunned all celebration.
Throughout his life, Hitler has made a big thing of his birthday, but on this final birthday, he's too depressed.
Those around Hitler were now contemplating the end.
In the final weeks and days in the bunker, people begin talking about the best method for committing suicide, whether it's to take a cyanide capsule or whether it's to shoot yourself. And it's a kind of hideous environment in which again and again people come back to this subject.
Hitler learned the 3rd SS Panzer Corps hadn't carried out the counter-offensive he ordered, an act he considered betrayal.
For the first time ever, Hitler publicly admits that he's given up. The facade has just gone, it's crumbled completely, and all you're left with is this husk who's just admitting that the battle is lost. And this surely is the moment when he decides that he's going to end it all, and he says as much.
There are those like the Goebbels who have every intention of following the Führer to the death and are also preparing for suicide and preparing to kill their 6 children. But there are many others, the majority of others, who are thanking Hitler for the cyanide tablet, but thinking, how can I get out of here alive? And for a lot of people, at the very end, their survival instinct kicks in.
Hitler told his staff he would stay in Berlin and kill himself, then have his body burned. In reply, he received a surprising telegram from his deputy, Hermann Göring.
He suddenly gets news from Göring, who's managed to flee to Bavaria, saying, "Dear Führer, you're locked up in Berlin, you can't do anything very much, so I think I'd better take over."
Göring wanted Germany's top job.
For Hitler, that's absolutely unacceptable. There is only one Führer.
He then discovered SS Chief Heinrich Himmler had been attempting to negotiate with the Allies.
He's furious because to Hitler, loyalty to him is a critical characteristic. Once somebody breaks that bond, then for Hitler that's the worst thing somebody can do.
Unable to reach Himmler, Hitler ordered the execution of his top aide, Hermann Fegelein. Guilty by association. Less than a year before, Hitler hosted Fegelein's wedding to Eva Braun's sister, Gretel. Despite Eva's pleas and the fact that Gretel was about to give birth to Fegelein's child, Hitler characteristically showed no mercy. He had Fegelein shot for desertion.
He is always capable of absolute ruthlessness, and he will always carry out his own wishes, and he will not submit to the desires of other people.
On the 23rd of April 1945, Stalin's vengeful troops stormed into Berlin. Their target was Hitler's bunker.
Towards the very end, when Albert Speer visits him, just a few days before the very end, he's really shocked to see that even right down in the Führer bunker, there are people who are visibly drunk, people smoking, things that Hitler absolutely disapproves of. The discipline is going and chaos has broken out.
For Adolf Hitler, the game was nearly over. There was only one card left for him to play. Adolf Hitler was trapped in a bunker below the Reich Chancellery as Soviet troops wreaked havoc in Berlin. Here he learned that his old friend Mussolini had been murdered and his body strung up alongside his mistress in a Milan square.
Hitler is desperately anxious that it's not going to happen to him. Absolutely confirms his decision that he will take his own life.
Hitler turned his thoughts to Eva Braun, the most loyal person in his life. He had always resisted her desire to marry, claiming it would distract him from his life's work. Now he had decided on suicide. There was no reason to deny her wish.
Hitler recognizes the incredible loyalty and devotion that Eva Braun has given him, and he agrees to marry her.
The simple ceremony took place in Hitler's conference room, in the bunker, just past midnight.
They swap rings, which have been stolen from prisoners in the Gestapo jail, and they sign their wedding certificate. Eva Braun seems to be flustered. She signs Eva B and then crosses out the B and puts Hitler.
That night, Hitler and his secretary, Traudl Junge, withdrew to his study, where he dictated his final will and testament. He instructed that once he was dead, Admiral Karl Dönitz should become president. Then he reaffirmed the obsessive belief he first expressed in Mein Kampf over 20 years before.
This is what Hitler says at the end in the bunker. Above all, I pledge the leadership of the nation and its followers to the scrupulous observation of the racial laws and to implacable opposition to the universal poisoner of all peoples, international jury. These are Hitler's last words.
For Hitler, the war was started by the Jews and lost by his army generals. He accepted no responsibility for himself. Soviet forces were now just a third of a mile from the bunker. At 3 p.m., Hitler asked his valet for his gun.
He's always had the idea that it's success or death. There's no middle way. Suicide is a fitting gesture for a hero such as himself.
His wife, Eva, had chosen to take cyanide and die with him. On the 1st of May 1945, German radio announced the death of Adolf Hitler. To preserve the myth of his heroism, the broadcast said he died fighting the Soviets. A wave of suicides followed the announcement.
Nazism is a death cult. It's an ideology that stresses loyalty and selfless devotion to an ideal and to a leader. And of course, what better way for humans to demonstrate that kind of loyalty than to take their own lives?
With their messiah now gone, the cult of Hitler quickly disintegrated.
For many Germans, the magic spell is over. The bond is cut. Hitler is dead. They're released, in a sense, from their commitment.
As images of the Führer were publicly burned, his followers scrambled to erase their association with Hitler and the Nazis. On the 6th of May 1945, the remnants of the Nazi regime sent General Alfred Jodl to sign Germany's unconditional surrender. Across the world, 60 million men, women and children lay dead. 7.5 million of Hitler's own people. Victims of battle, of death camps, of one man's warped vision.
Hitler had this incredible magnetism. He had this ability to speak to Germans deep in their soul.
Unser deutsches Volk, unser Vaterland, die Bewegung, die beides einmal recht muss.
Such was the power of Hitler's legacy that only in 2015 was reprinting aloud of his poisonous manifesto, Mein Kampf.
We're told not to see the world in black and white, to always recognize that there are various shades and gradations. But in Hitler's case, it's difficult to see him as anything else but the embodiment of evil.